The crystalline towers of the galactic assembly stretched toward 3 suns, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that would have driven human eyes to madness. Inside the grand chamber, representatives from 47 species gathered in an emergency session, their bio-translators humming with anxious chatter. Admiral Cretan of the Zephyrian fleet stood at the central podium, his 4 arms gesturing emphatically. His scaled skin shifted from deep purple to alarmed crimson as he addressed the assembly. Distinguished members, we face an unprecedented crisis. The Vorathian Dominion has conquered 12 systems in the past solar cycle. Their war fleets number in the thousands, and their appetite for expansion shows no signs of diminishing. Ambassador Thelix, representing the ancient crystalline collective, emitted a series of melodic tones through her resonance chambers. The translator converted her crystalline vibrations into audible speech. "Admiral, we have faced conquerors before. The Dominion may be ruthless, but surely our combined forces can mount an adequate defense." Cretan's secondary eyes dimmed, a sign of grave concern among his species. "That is precisely why I have called this emergency session. Our projections indicate that even with our combined military strength, we stand less than a 30% chance of repelling a full-scale Vorathian assault. We need reinforcements, and we need them from a source the Dominion has not yet calculated into their strategic planning." A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. Councillor Vexry, a being composed entirely of condensed electromagnetic energy contained within a specialized suit, pulsed with skeptical frequencies. "Admiral, we represent the most advanced civilizations in this sector of the galaxy. From whom exactly do you propose we seek assistance?" Cretan paused, his respirators flaring as he prepared to utter words he knew would be met with derision. "I propose we contact the humans of Earth." The chamber erupted. Laughter, disbelief, and outright mockery filled the air in dozens of languages and communication methods. The translator system struggled to keep pace with the cacophony. "Humans!" Ambassador Thelix's crystalline form flashed with colors, indicating amusement. "Admiral, surely you jest. Humans are folklore, cautionary tales we tell our young about the dangers of nuclear weaponry and primitive aggression. No species could possibly survive such a violent developmental period." Councillor Vexry's containment suit pulsed with rhythmic patterns that translated as sardonic laughter. "Next you will tell us you have located the mythical gardens of Zenthai, or discovered the lost civilization of the first makers. Admiral, with respect, perhaps the stress of the Vorathian advance has affected your cognitive functions." Cretan remained calm, though his primary heart rate elevated significantly. He had anticipated this reaction. "I understand your skepticism. For generations, we have dismissed Earth as a legend, a planet supposedly quarantined by the ancient precursor species due to the dangerous potential of its dominant inhabitants. But I have evidence." He activated the holographic display system. The air above the podium shimmered and an image materialized, a small blue planet swirled with white clouds, predominantly covered in water. Continents of green and brown were visible beneath the atmospheric layer. This image was captured by our deep space probe Wanderer 7, which was pushed off course by a gravitational anomaly near the Orion Arm. The probe's sensors detected this planet in a system the ancient star charts designate as Sol. The spectral analysis matches exactly the descriptions from the precursor archives. A yellow dwarf star, a planet with a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, abundant liquid water, and significant electromagnetic activity indicating advanced civilization. The chamber fell silent. Even the most skeptical delegates leaned forward, their various sensory organs focused on the hologram. Ambassador Thelix's color shifted to a more serious hue. "Electromagnetic activity could indicate many things, Admiral. It does not prove the existence of humans, nor does it prove they possess the military capacity to aid us against the Dominion. Cretan manipulated the controls, and the hologram zoomed in. The image quality degraded, but still showed structures, vast cities with towering buildings, networks of illuminated pathways, and what appeared to be orbital installations. The probe detected radio transmissions, energy signatures consistent with fusion reactors, and most tellingly, launch signatures of spacecraft leaving the planet's gravity well. Someone is there, and they are technologically active. Dr. Zelmar, the head of the Xenological Research Institute, rose from his seat. His species, the Mindel, were known for their analytical capabilities and emotional detachment. Admiral, assuming for a moment that this planet does harbor intelligent life, and further assuming these are the legendary humans, what makes you believe they would possess military capabilities superior to our own? The stories describe them as barely having achieved faster-than-light travel when the precursors supposedly established their quarantine. Cretan's facial tendrils twitched, a gesture of grim determination. Doctor, consider why the precursors would quarantine a species in the first place. According to the fragments we have recovered from their archives, they did not quarantine primitives or weaklings. They quarantined species they considered existential threats. The accounts describe humans as possessing an irrational tenacity, an inability to accept defeat, and a capacity for violence that frightened even the precursors themselves. Fairy tales, Councillor Vexry interrupted, his containment suit flickering dismissively. Stories to frighten the gullible. Perhaps, Cretan acknowledged. But consider this. What if the stories are true? What if humans survived their quarantine and continued to develop? They would have had millennia of isolation to advance their technology without interference or guidance from the Galactic Assembly. They would have faced their challenges alone, which, according to the archives, was their specialty. They thrived in adversity. Ambassador Thelix's crystalline structure hummed thoughtfully. You are proposing we break a precursor quarantine, Admiral. Even if we locate this planet definitively, even if we could establish contact, such an action could have consequences we cannot foresee. The precursors have been extinct for over 10,000 years, Cretan countered. Their quarantine protocols are archaeological curiosities, not binding law. And as for consequences, I assure you that the consequence of Varathian conquest will be far more tangible and immediate than any theoretical danger posed by contacting Earth. The debate continued for hours, species divided along ideological lines. The more cautious civilizations, those who had achieved their advancement through careful planning and risk avoidance, opposed the contact. The younger, more aggressive species, those who still remembered what it meant to fight for survival, were intrigued. Finally, High Chancellor Morvix, an ancient being whose species had observed the galaxy for longer than most civilizations had existed, called for order. His voice, processed through translation matrices, carried the weight of centuries. We will put this matter to a vote. All those in favor of authorizing an expedition to the Sol system to investigate the possibility of human existence and potential alliance, signify your agreement. The voting process took 30 minutes, as each species consulted with their home governments through faster-than-light communication arrays. When the results appeared on the central display, Cretan allowed himself a small gesture of relief. The motion had passed by a narrow margin, 51% in favor. High Chancellor Morvex's ancient eyes, all 6 of them, focused on the Zephyrian Admiral. Admiral Cretan, you will lead this expedition. You will take a diplomatic vessel, not a warship. If humans exist, and if they are as dangerous as the legends suggest, appearing in their skies with military force would be inadvisable. You have 60 standard cycles to reach the Sol system, make contact if possible, and return with your findings. The Assembly will not commit to any formal alliance without concrete evidence of human capabilities. Cretan bowed, his 4 arms crossing in a gesture of acceptance. "Understood, High Chancellor. I will depart within the next planetary rotation." As the assembly dispersed, Dr. Zelmar approached the Admiral. "I will accompany you on this expedition if you will have me. The xenological implications alone are worth the journey, regardless of the military considerations." "Your expertise would be invaluable, Doctor," Cretan replied. "Though I warn you, we may be walking into a situation that no amount of academic preparation can fully equip us for." The Mindel scientist's facial features, which resembled a human's, but with larger cranial capacity and silver-tinted skin, arranged themselves in what his species used as a smile. "Admiral, I have spent my entire career studying extinct civilizations and theoretical xenology. The possibility of encountering a species from the precursor era, alive and evolved, is worth any risk." The expedition ship, designated the Harmonious Seeker, departed from the Assembly's primary starport 3 rotations later. It was a vessel designed for long-range exploration and diplomatic missions, equipped with the most advanced translation matrices, scientific laboratories, and most importantly, defensive shields capable of withstanding significant punishment. The crew numbered 30 individuals from 12 different species, each selected for their expertise and open-mindedness. As they entered the faster-than-light corridor that would carry them toward the Orion Arm, Cretan stood on the observation deck, watching the stars stretch into lines of light. His communications officer, a young Zepharian named Tilix, approached with a data tablet. "Admiral, I have compiled all available information on humans from the precursor archives and various cultural databases. Most of it is contradictory, and much of it reads like mythology rather than historical record." "Give me the most relevant details," Cretan requested, his eyes never leaving the distorted star field outside the viewport. Tilix consulted the tablet, her voice uncertain. "According to the archives, humans are a carbon-based bipedal species with internal skeletal structures. They evolved from predatory ancestors, which partially explains their aggressive tendencies. They possess only 2 eyes, 2 auditory receptors, and relatively weak physical capabilities compared to most spacefaring species. However, they compensate with tool use, social cooperation, and what the precursors described as disturbing creativity in the application of violence." "Anything about their culture or psychology?" Cretan asked. "The archives suggest they are tribalistic, but capable of forming large cooperative groups when facing external threats. They have a concept called spite, where they will harm themselves if it means harming an enemy more significantly. The precursors noted that humans seem to lack the standard evolutionary programming that causes species to surrender when facing overwhelming odds. Instead, they tend to fight harder." Cretan's tendrils twitched with a mixture of apprehension and hope. "That could be exactly what we need. The Vorathian Dominion expects civilized opponents who will calculate costs and benefits, who will surrender when the mathematical probability of victory drops below acceptable thresholds. If humans truly are irrational fighters, it might give us the unpredictability we lack." Dr. Zelmar, who had been listening from a nearby console, interjected, "Admiral, I must point out that such psychology, if it truly exists, could be a double-edged blade. A species that does not know when to surrender might also not know when to stop. We could be inviting a worse threat than the Vorathians." "Noted, Doctor. But right now, I am more concerned with the immediate threat than theoretical future ones." The journey through faster-than-light space took 43 standard cycles. During that time, the crew prepared protocols for every possible scenario they could imagine. First contact procedures were reviewed and revised daily. The linguistic team worked tirelessly to create baseline communication algorithms, though without actual human language samples, their work remained largely theoretical. On the 44th cycle, they dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. The main view screen showed a yellow star, unremarkable except for what it might harbor in its orbital family. "Sensors are detecting 9 planetary bodies," the science officer reported. "The third planet from the star matches the parameters from our probe data: nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, liquid water, and significant electromagnetic emissions. I am detecting what appears to be artificial satellites in orbit around the planet, and there are structures on its single large natural satellite." Cretan felt his heart racing in sync. "Can you identify the source of the electromagnetic emissions?" "Multiple sources, Admiral. Radio waves, microwave transmissions, and what appears to be laser-based communication between ground installations and orbital structures. The technological signature is consistent with a Type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale, possibly approaching Type 2 based on the sophistication of their orbital infrastructure." "Any response to our presence?" "Not yet, sir. We are still at extreme range. However, I am detecting movement among the orbital structures. Some of them appear to be changing position." Dr. Zelmar studied his console, his analytical mind processing the data. "Admiral, those orbital structures are too numerous and too well distributed to be purely civilian. I count over 200 distinct platforms, and their positioning suggests a defensive grid. If these are humans, they are well prepared for threats from space." "Recommendations?" Cretan asked his senior staff. Tylik spoke first. "We should broadcast a standard greeting on multiple frequencies and approach slowly. Any aggressive movement might trigger a defensive response." "Agreed," Dr. Zelmar added. "Though I suggest we also transmit mathematical proofs and scientific constants to demonstrate our intelligence and peaceful intentions." Cretan nodded. "Implement both suggestions. Approach at 1/4 standard velocity and keep our shields at standby power. I want them to know we are not hiding, but I also want to be able to respond if they prove hostile." The Harmonious Seeker began its slow approach, broadcasting greetings in every language in the Assembly's database, along with mathematical sequences and representations of atomic structures. For 30 minutes, there was no response. The ship crossed the orbit of the system's 8th planet, a massive gas giant with dozens of moons. Then, suddenly, every console on the bridge flashed red. "Multiple radar locks," the tactical officer shouted, his species' natural camouflage patterns activating in stress, turning his skin a mottled pattern of greys and blacks. "I am detecting power surges from at least 50 of those orbital platforms. Admiral, they are weapons. Very powerful weapons." "Hold position," Cretan ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Continue broadcasting peaceful intentions." "Admiral," the communications officer interrupted, her voice tight with tension. "We are receiving a transmission, audio only. It is in a language not in our databases, but the translation matrix is attempting to process it." "Put it through." A voice filled the bridge, speaking in sounds that were somehow both alien and eerily familiar to several species present. The translation matrix worked furiously, and after a few seconds, text began appearing on their screens, followed by synthesized audio in their own languages. "Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted space. Identify yourself and state your intentions immediately, or you will be considered hostile. This is your only warning." The voice was flat, emotionless, delivered with absolute certainty. This was not a species uncertain of its ability to enforce its demands. Cretan straightened, his forearms gesturing for the communications officer to open a channel. "This is Admiral Cretan of the Galactic Assembly vessel Harmonious Seeker." We come in peace, seeking dialogue with the inhabitants of the third planet of this system. We mean no harm and request permission to establish formal first contact protocols." The silence that followed stretched for nearly a full minute. Then the voice returned, and this time there was a hint of emotion, suspicion perhaps, or curiosity. "Galactic Assembly. We have no record of such an organization. Stand by for verification. Any attempt to approach the inner system before authorization is granted will result in immediate engagement. Do you understand?" "Understood," Cretan replied. "We will maintain our current position." Dr. Zelmar leaned close to the Admiral, speaking quietly. "Admiral, their response time and the sophistication of their translation suggest significant computational power. They analyzed our language, cross-referenced our claims, and responded in under a minute. That is impressive." "Their weapons are more concerning," the tactical officer interjected. "I have been analyzing the energy signatures from those platforms. Admiral, some of them are reading power levels that match our heaviest cruiser-class weapons, and they have over 200 of them just in near-planetary orbit. I'm detecting additional signatures further out in the system." Before Cretan could respond, the main view screen flickered and activated, showing an image that made several crew members gasp in astonishment. A human appeared on the screen. The being was indeed bipedal, with two eyes positioned on the front of its face, a predator's arrangement. Its skin was a dark brown color, and short, dark hair covered the top of its head. It wore some kind of uniform, dark blue with insignia that likely indicated rank or position. But what struck Cretan most was the eyes. They were sharp, analytical, and completely unafraid. "I am Commander Helen Ortiz of Earth's Planetary Defense Network," the human said, the translation now nearly perfect. "Admiral Cretan, you claim to represent a galactic assembly of some kind. In all our centuries of monitoring local space, we have never detected evidence of such an organization. Explain." Cretan stepped forward, ensuring he was fully visible on his own transmission. He noticed the human's eyes tracking his forearms, taking in his scaled appearance, showing interest, but no fear. "Commander Ortiz, the Assembly represents 47 spacefaring civilizations in this region of the galaxy. Until very recently, we believed your species to be extinct or mythological. We came here to investigate and, if possible, to request your aid in a matter of galactic security." "Now," a slight smile crossed the human's face, an expression the translation matrix identified as amusement mixed with irony. "You thought we were mythological? That is interesting, considering we have similar stories about mysterious aliens who supposedly quarantined our system millennia ago. History has a sense of humor, it seems." "You know about the quarantine?" Dr. Zelmar interjected, unable to contain his scholarly excitement. The human's gaze shifted to the Mindel scientist. "We discovered evidence of it approximately 300 years ago when we began serious expansion beyond our planet. Automated systems in several locations throughout our system, clearly not of human origin, designed to prevent faster-than-light travel within our star system and to mask our electromagnetic signature to outside observers. We spent considerable effort studying and eventually disabling them. We have been waiting for someone to show up ever since." "You disabled precursor technology?" Cretan's surprise was evident in the color shift of his scales. "Those systems were designed to last for eternity." "Nothing lasts forever, Admiral," Ortiz replied, "especially when a species is motivated to break free. Now, you mentioned a matter of galactic security. I'm going to transfer this conversation to someone with greater authority to negotiate. Stand by." The screen went dark for a moment, then reactivated, showing a different human. This one was older, with grey hair and deep lines in its skin around the eyes and mouth. It wore a more elaborate uniform, with additional insignia. The translation matrix provided a name from the visible identification: Secretary-General Paul DeSanto, United Earth Government. Admiral Cretan, the older human began, its voice carrying the weight of authority and experience. Commander Ortiz has briefed me on the basics. You are from an assembly of alien civilizations, and you need our help. I will be direct, as I assume your time is valuable. What exactly is this threat you face, and why should humanity involve itself in galactic politics after millennia of isolation? Cretan appreciated the directness. He had dealt with enough politicians to recognize a straight talker. Secretary-General, the Vorathian Dominion is a militaristic empire that has conquered 12 star systems in the past year alone. Their fleets number in the thousands of warships, and their strategy is one of overwhelming force and complete subjugation. Mathematical projections indicate they will reach the Assembly's core worlds within 2 years, and we do not have the military strength to stop them. And you want humanity's military assistance, the Secretary-General stated rather than asked. Based on what? We have been isolated for thousands of years. For all you know, we are as weak as any other single civilization. With respect, sir, the evidence suggests otherwise. Your orbital defenses alone rival anything most assembly species can deploy. Your reaction time, your translation capabilities, your apparent comfort with encountering alien life, all of it suggests a level of preparedness and technological sophistication that took other species millennia to achieve. The human leader's expression remained neutral. Admiral, let me be clear about something. Humanity has not had the luxury of developing in a benign galaxy with trade partners and peaceful neighbors. We have spent our entire existence fighting nature, fighting each other, and for the past 3 centuries, preparing to fight whoever built that quarantine system should they return. We are not a peaceful species by nature, though we have learned to cooperate when necessary. If we are to involve ourselves in your conflict, I need to know everything. I need to know who your enemies are, what their capabilities are. And most importantly, I need to understand what humanity gains from this alliance. A seat at the Galactic Assembly, Cretan offered. Recognition as a sovereign spacefaring civilization with all the rights and privileges that entails. Access to Assembly technology, trade networks, and diplomatic relations with 47 civilizations. And perhaps most relevant to your strategic concerns, allies who can provide intelligence and resources for your own defense. And if we refuse, Cretan's scales shifted to a darker hue, honesty compelling him to speak plainly. Then the Vorathians will eventually reach your system, whether that takes 10 years or 100. They are expansionist by nature and philosophy. Once they have consumed the Assembly, they will continue outward. Better to fight them now as part of a coalition than to face them alone later when they are even stronger. The Secretary-General studied Cretan through the view screen for a long moment, those predator's eyes calculating, weighing, considering. Finally, he spoke. You will be permitted to send a shuttle to Earth, bring evidence of this Vorathian threat and a detailed proposal for this alliance. I will convene the United Earth Council to review your request. But understand this, Admiral, if this is some kind of deception, if you represent a threat to Earth, you will discover exactly why the precursors were afraid of humanity. Are we clear? Perfectly clear, Secretary-General, Cretan replied, a gesture of respect conveyed through his body language that the humans seemed to understand, despite the species barrier. Thank you for this opportunity. The transmission ended, and Cretan allowed himself to release the tension he had been holding. Dr. Zelmar approached, his expression unreadable. Admiral, I believe we have found the humans. Indeed, Doctor. The question now is whether we have found salvation or simply traded one danger for another. The shuttle descent through Earth's atmosphere was an experience that left even the most seasoned members of Cretan's delegation awestruck. The planet was vibrant in a way few worlds managed. Clouds swirled in dynamic patterns, vast oceans reflected sunlight, and the continental land masses showed both natural wilderness and the geometric patterns of massive urban development. Commander Ortiz had personally overseen their landing clearance, guiding them to a facility that the translation matrix identified as being in a location called Geneva. The city sprawled across a valley with mountains visible in the distance, and a large body of water that appeared to be a lake dominated the landscape. As the shuttle settled onto the landing pad, Cretan noticed something that made his combat-trained instincts activate. The entire facility was clearly military in nature, despite the diplomatic designation. Sensor-resistant bunkers dotted the perimeter. Anti-aircraft installations were barely concealed beneath camouflage netting, and the energy signatures suggested substantial underground installations. "They are taking no chances with us," Tilix observed quietly as they prepared to disembark. "Would you?" Dr. Zelmar responded. "We appeared in their system unannounced, claiming to represent civilizations they did not know existed, and asking for military assistance. Paranoia seems reasonable under the circumstances." A delegation of humans waited at the base of the shuttle's ramp. Secretary General De Santo stood at the center, flanked by what were clearly military personnel and several individuals whose attire suggested scientific or diplomatic roles. As Cretan descended the ramp, careful to move slowly and appear non-threatening despite his size advantage over the humans, he studied his hosts carefully. Humans, he decided, were physically unremarkable by galactic standards. They were smaller than Zephyrians, lacking natural armor, claws, or obvious defensive capabilities. But their eyes, every human present, had that same sharp, calculating gaze that suggested intelligence actively processing information and preparing responses. These were not beings who would be easily intimidated. "Secretary General," Cretan began, using the translation device attached to his uniform to ensure clear communication, "I thank you for receiving us." "Admiral," De Santo responded, his hand extended in what the cultural database identified as a gesture of greeting called a handshake. Cretan carefully mimicked the gesture with one of his 4 hands, noting the surprising firmness of the human's grip. "Welcome to Earth. I trust your journey down was uneventful." "Your atmospheric control network is impressively sophisticated," Cretan replied diplomatically, though he meant it as genuine observation rather than flattery. A slight smile crossed the Secretary General's features. "We have had centuries to refine it. Please come inside. We have prepared a conference room where we can discuss your proposal in detail." The interior of the facility was a study in contrasts. Sleek modern architecture combined with what appeared to be historical artwork and symbols from various human cultures. Cretan noticed flags representing different nations or regions, suggesting that Earth's political unification was perhaps more recent than the humans had implied. The conference room itself was spacious, with a large table surrounded by comfortable seating designed to accommodate various body types. Cretan noticed that some seats had been modified. Clearly, the humans had studied the physical characteristics of his crew and prepared accordingly. That attention to detail spoke volumes about their capabilities. Once everyone was seated, Secretary General De Santo wasted no time. "Admiral, you promised evidence of the Varathian threat. My military advisors are skeptical. In our experience, when someone appears suddenly asking for help against a great enemy, it is often because they want others to fight their battles for them. Convince us this is different." Cretan activated the holographic projector he had brought. The air above the conference table shimmered and resolved into a 3-dimensional star map showing the relevant sector of the galaxy. Red dots marked Varathian-controlled systems, and blue dots represented assembly worlds. The pattern was clear. The red was systematically consuming the blue. This is the territorial situation as of 3 weeks ago. Each red marker represents a system under Varathian control. They began their expansion approximately 5 years ago from their home system here. He highlighted a cluster of stars deep in what had previously been uncharted space. Their initial expansion was slow, but once they encountered the first assembly species, everything changed. He manipulated the controls, and the hologram shifted to show recorded footage from various battles. The humans watched in silence as Varathian warships, massive vessels bristling with weapons, systematically destroyed defending fleets. The ships were brutal in design, all sharp angles and heavy armor, built purely for war. "The Varathians do not negotiate," Cretan continued. "They do not take prisoners, they do not establish occupation governments, and they do not allow conquered populations to retain their cultural identities. They strip systems of resources, conscript or eliminate the populations, and move on. In 5 years, they have effectively erased 7 distinct civilizations from existence and subjugated 5 others." One of the human military officers, a woman whose uniform identified her as General Alexandra Reed, leaned forward. "What are their technological capabilities? What makes them so effective?" "Superior numbers, primarily," Cretan replied honestly. "Their ships are not technologically superior to assembly vessels. In fact, ship for ship, we estimate our forces are roughly equivalent, but they field fleets of thousands where we can manage only hundreds. Intelligence suggests they have converted their entire civilization into a war economy, with every resource directed toward expansion." "What about their psychology?" asked a human wearing civilian clothing but identified as Dr. Lisa Chang, presumably a psychologist or sociologist. "Why are they doing this?" Dr. Zelmar spoke up, having prepared for this question. "The Varathian philosophy, as we understand it, centers on a concept they call the Great Harmony. They believe the galaxy should be unified under a single collective consciousness, with all species contributing to a greater whole. Individuality, cultural diversity, and independent thought are considered inefficiencies to be eliminated." "Assimilation," General Reed said flatly. "They are trying to assimilate the galaxy." "An adequate comparison," Zelmar agreed, "though perhaps more brutal than your reference implies. They do not preserve useful individuals or technologies. They simply reshape everything to fit their predetermined pattern." Secretary General DeSanto studied the holographic display, his expression grim. "And your Assembly's response to this threat has been what, exactly?" Cretan appreciated the directness, though the answer was uncomfortable. "Initially, we believed it was a regional conflict that could be contained. By the time we recognized the true scale of the threat, the Varathians had already achieved strategic momentum. We have won several battles, but consistently lose the overall strategic position. Our military academies trained us for defensive wars and disputes between member species, not for existential conflict against an enemy that neither negotiates nor retreats." "You are losing," another military officer, identified as Admiral James Morrison, stated bluntly. "Yes," Cretan admitted, his scales shifting to a color that indicated shame among his species. "Without significant reinforcement or a dramatic change in strategic approach, Assembly analysts project total Varathian victory within 2 years." The humans were silent for a long moment, exchanging glances that suggested complex non-verbal communication. Finally, Secretary General DeSanto spoke. "Admiral, I need to consult with my advisors and the Earth Council. This is not a decision I can make unilaterally. I need you to understand something about humanity. We have only recently achieved unified planetary government, and we are protective of what we have built. Many of our leaders will question whether we should involve ourselves in what may appear to be someone else's war. I understand, Secretary General. I only ask that you consider this. Today, It is someone else's war. Tomorrow, it will be yours. The Varathians will not stop simply because they have consumed the assembly. Expansion is not a phase for them. It is their entire reason for existence. Noted. We will reconvene in 24 hours. In the meantime, I am assigning liaisons to your delegation. They will answer questions you may have about Earth and humanity, and they will help facilitate communication with various interest groups who will want input on this decision. After the formal session ended, Cretan and his team were escorted to diplomatic quarters within the facility. The rooms were comfortable, adapted to their various physiological needs, though Cretan noticed the subtle security measures, monitors, reinforced walls and energy-damping fields that would prevent unauthorized communications or escapes. Their assigned liaison was Commander Ortiz, who arrived an hour after they had settled in. She carried a data device and what appeared to be refreshments, though she had clearly checked that they were compatible with the delegates' biochemistry. "Admiral Doctor," she greeted them formally, "I thought you might have questions while you wait for the Council's deliberations." "Many questions," Dr. Zelmar replied immediately. "If I may be direct, your species' technological development seems to have followed an unusual trajectory. Most civilizations progress in relatively predictable patterns, but humanity appears to have advanced in irregular leaps." Ortiz smiled, a gesture the doctor was learning to interpret as indicating various emotions depending on context. "You are diplomatic, Doctor. What you really want to know is how a supposedly quarantined species achieved technological parity with established galactic civilizations, correct?" "Yes," Zelmar admitted without embarrassment. "The discontinuity is academically fascinating." "The short answer is necessity and paranoia," Ortiz replied, taking a seat and gesturing for them to do the same. "When we discovered the quarantine systems, we knew someone had deliberately isolated us. We did not know why, we did not know who, and we did not know if they would return. That uncertainty drove us to prepare for every possible scenario. We invested enormously in defensive technologies, space-based weapon systems, and rapid response capabilities. The orbital defense platforms we observed," Cretan interjected. "How many do you actually have?" Ortiz paused, clearly calculating how much to reveal. "The ones you detected are only a portion of our defensive network. I am authorized to tell you that we currently maintain over 1,500 weapons platforms in various orbits throughout the Sol system, with additional installations on Luna, certain asteroids, and strategic positions at the system's edge." Even Cretan, trained to maintain emotional control, could not hide his surprise. "That is more than most assembly species maintain for entire sectors of space. We had centuries to build, and we were motivated. But defensive systems are only part of it. We also developed offensive capabilities." "I notice you use the past tense," Dr. Zelmar observed carefully. "Developed, not developing." "Yes," Ortiz confirmed. "For the past 50 years, humanity has been preparing to break the quarantine and explore beyond our system. We knew whoever built those barriers might still be out there. We wanted to be ready for either diplomacy or conflict." Cretan's tactical mind was processing implications rapidly. "You have faster-than-light vessels, multiple vessels." "We have a fleet," Ortiz confirmed, her expression neutral. "I am not authorized to discuss specifications or numbers, but yes, we have the capability to operate beyond our system. We have been conducting reconnaissance missions into nearby systems for approximately 30 years, gathering intelligence and preparing for the day we would make formal contact with whatever else is out there." "Then you have seen the Varathian advance," Cretan stated. "You have been watching the Assembly's conflict." Ortiz's silence was answer enough. Finally, she nodded. "We observed their initial campaigns approximately 3 years ago. Our long-range scouts detected the battles, analyzed the tactics, and reported back. We have been monitoring the situation and preparing for the possibility that the conflict would eventually reach us. Why did you not intervene? Why did you not contact the assembly and offer assistance? The question came from Tylix, who had been quiet until now, her youth making her less practiced at diplomatic restraint. Ortiz's expression hardened slightly, because we did not know if the assembly was the good faction or the bad one. For all we knew, the Varathians were defending themselves against an aggressive coalition. We are not so naive as to involve ourselves in a galactic war based on incomplete information and the word of strangers who might be just as dangerous as their enemies. The honesty was refreshing, if uncomfortable. Cretan found himself respecting the human's caution even as it complicated his mission. A fair position. How do we convince you that the assembly does not represent a threat to Earth? You cannot. Not entirely, Ortiz replied. But over the next day, you will have opportunities to present your case to various groups, scientists, military strategists, economists, and representatives from Earth's various regional governments. They will each assess the situation from their perspective. If enough of them conclude that alliance with the Assembly serves humanity's interests, and that you are the lesser threat compared to the Varathians, then you will have your support. And if they conclude otherwise, then you will be escorted back to your ship, and humanity will prepare to defend itself independently when the Varathians eventually arrive. The next 18 hours were exhausting. Cretan and his delegation presented evidence, answered questions, and endured skeptical interrogation from dozens of human experts. The humans were thorough to the point of being invasive, demanding details about assembly technology, political structures, military capabilities, and strategic planning that Cretan would have preferred to keep classified. But he understood their position. The humans were being asked to commit to a potentially existential conflict based on the word of aliens they had just met. They would be foolish not to be thorough. What surprised him most was the diversity of perspectives among the humans themselves. They argued with each other, challenged their own leaders' assumptions, and debated every aspect of the proposed alliance with a passion that seemed almost violent by assembly standards. Yet somehow, through all the conflict and disagreement, they were working toward a consensus. Is all human decision-making this chaotic? Dr. Zelmar asked Ortiz during a break between sessions. The commander laughed, a sound that the translator matrix indicated as expressing genuine amusement. This is actually quite organized by our standards, Doctor. We have had global warfare over lesser disagreements. The fact that we are debating rather than fighting means we have made progress. Finally, after seemingly endless presentations and debates, Secretary-General De Santo reconvened the formal assembly. Cretan and his delegation were brought back to the main conference room, where human leaders from across the planet had gathered, some physically present and others participating through advanced holographic projection. Admiral Cretan, De Santo began, his tone formal and grave. The Earth Council has deliberated on your request. Before I announce our decision, I want to be clear about something. This has been one of the most difficult decisions in the history of our unified government. Many council members have serious reservations about involving humanity in what could be seen as someone else's conflict. Cretan felt his secondary hearts accelerating, a stress response he tried to control. However, De Santo continued, we have concluded that the Varathian Dominion represents a clear threat not just to the Galactic Assembly, but to all independent civilizations, including Earth. Their philosophy of forced assimilation and their systematic destruction of cultural diversity is antithetical to human values. Moreover, our strategic analysts agree with your assessment that if the Assembly falls, Earth will eventually face the Varathians alone. Therefore, subject to certain conditions which we will negotiate, Earth is prepared to enter into an alliance with the Galactic Assembly and to commit military forces to the conflict against the Varathian Dominion. Relief flooded through Cretan so intensely that his scales shifted through several colors in rapid succession. Secretary General, on behalf of the Assembly, I thank you. May I ask what forces Earth is prepared to commit? A new figure stepped forward, General Reed, her expression suggesting she had been waiting for this moment. Admiral, you asked what humanity could contribute to this war. I believe a demonstration would be more effective than words. She activated a holographic display that replaced the star map. What appeared made several members of Cretan's delegation gasp audibly. Ships, thousands of them. The display showed vessel after vessel, organized in neat formations, each one tagged with specifications and capabilities. They were not exploration vessels or converted civilian craft. These were warships, purpose-built for combat, bristling with weapon systems, armored heavily, and designed with clear tactical doctrine in mind. For the past 150 years, General Reed explained, humanity has been building a war fleet. We did not know who we would fight or when, but we knew that eventually someone would come. These vessels represent humanity's answer to the question of galactic security. Dr. Zelmar was studying the specifications, his analytical mind processing the numbers. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. These cannot be accurate. The power generation alone is accurate, Reed confirmed. We developed fusion technology that is apparently more efficient than assembly standards, and we have integrated weapon systems that prioritize kinetic impact and explosive force over energy weapons, based on our analysis that armor technology generally advances faster than energy shielding. How many? Cretan asked, almost afraid of the answer. General Reed's smile held no warmth, only grim satisfaction. Our current active fleet consists of 10,000 combat-ready warships, ranging from fast attack corvettes to heavy dreadnoughts. We can mobilize additional vessels from reserve status, bringing our total available force to approximately 15,000 ships. The silence in the room was absolute. Finally, Tylex spoke, her voice shaking. Admiral, that is more than the entire active strength of the Assembly's combined forces. I am aware, Cretan replied, his own voice unsteady. He looked at Secretary General DeSanto. You maintained secrecy about these forces during our negotiations. Yes, DeSanto confirmed without apology. We needed to assess whether you were trustworthy before revealing our full capabilities. Our analysts concluded that if we showed weakness, we might be conquered by the Assembly instead of the Varathians. If we showed overwhelming strength too early, you might decide we were too dangerous to contact. We waited until we were certain of your sincerity and the legitimacy of the threat you described. A gamble, Cretan observed. Everything worth doing is a gamble, Admiral. The question is always whether the potential gain justifies the risk. General Reed manipulated the display, zooming in on specific vessel classes. I want you to understand what you are getting, Admiral. These are not ceremonial ships or prestige vessels built to impress neighbors. Every one of these ships was designed with lessons learned from studying thousands of years of human warfare. We have incorporated every tactical advantage we could conceive, and we have drilled our crews relentlessly. We do not have ancient traditions of honor-based combat or cultural prohibitions against certain weapons or tactics. We fight to win. I need to contact the Assembly immediately, Cretan said, struggling to maintain composure. They must know about this. They must prepare to integrate your forces into the overall strategic plan. Already done, DeSanto replied. While you were in various meetings, we established contact with your High Chancellor using the communication protocols you provided. They are aware of our decision and are preparing to receive an Earth diplomatic mission to finalize the formal alliance. Then what remains? Cretan asked. Details, DeSanto said. Terms of the alliance, command structure integration, technology sharing protocols, and most importantly, strategic coordination. We have our own intelligence on Varathian force dispositions and tactics. We will be sending military liaison officers to work with your command staff. But there is one more thing you should see. He nodded to General Reed, who manipulated the holographic controls again. The display shifted to show a single vessel, larger than any other ship in the human fleet. The design was elegant, but clearly deadly, incorporating both defensive and offensive systems in quantities that seemed excessive even by military standards. This is the Unity, Reed explained, our flagship and the most powerful vessel we have constructed. It will serve as the command center for the joint human assembly fleet, and it will carry me, as I will be commanding the human forces in this conflict. Cretan studied the specifications displayed beneath the ship's image. The numbers seemed almost impossible. General, this vessel's armament exceeds that of any ship I have ever encountered. Its shield generators alone were designed on the assumption that we would be outnumbered and outgunned, Reed interrupted. We built the Unity to survive any engagement long enough to coordinate fleet actions and provide tactical support. It is not just a warship, it is a mobile command fortress. When can your forces deploy? Cretan asked, his military training overriding his amazement. The forward elements of our fleet can be at assembly core worlds within 3 weeks, Reed replied. The full fleet will require approximately 6 weeks for complete mobilization and positioning. We have already begun preparations based on the intelligence you provided. Dr. Zelmar, who had been processing all the information, finally spoke. Forgive me, but I must ask, why? Why did humanity build such an overwhelming force? Even accounting for paranoia about the quarantine, this seems excessive. Commander Ortiz answered this time, her expression serious. Doctor, humanity's history is filled with lessons about the cost of being unprepared. We have seen civilizations fall because they assumed peace would last forever, because they believed their defenses were adequate, or because they underestimated their enemies. We decided long ago that if we ever faced an existential threat, we would face it with overwhelming force. Not because we wanted to conquer anyone, but because we wanted to ensure no one could conquer us. The problem with building weapons, Secretary General DeSanto added, is that eventually you must use them or they become useless. We built this fleet to defend Earth. Now we will use it to defend our new allies, and in doing so defend the principles we believe are worth fighting for. The formal negotiations continued for another 12 hours, working out the details of the alliance, establishing communication protocols, and coordinating the initial deployment of human forces. Cretan sent regular updates to the assembly, each one generating more disbelief and relief in equal measure. Finally, as Earth's sun was setting over Geneva, casting golden light through the conference room windows, the final documents were completed. Secretary General DeSanto and Admiral Cretan signed the Alliance Treaty, a historic document that formally ended humanity's isolation and committed them to their first interstellar war. There is one more thing, DeSanto said, as they concluded the formalities. Our intelligence services have been analyzing Varathian communications and strategic patterns. We believe we have identified a vulnerability in their supply lines. If we can coordinate a series of strikes across multiple systems simultaneously, we might be able to disrupt their expansion long enough to reorganize the Assembly's defenses. A counter-offensive, Cretan said, hope rising in his chest. The Assembly has not attempted anything so ambitious since the war began. That is because the Assembly has been fighting defensively, reacting to Varathian moves rather than seizing initiative, General Reed observed. It is time to change that dynamic. We propose a joint operation, combining assembly knowledge of the local space with human strike capabilities. We show the Varathians that they now face an enemy willing and able to strike back. The return journey to the Harmonious Seeker felt surreal to Cretan. In less than 3 planetary rotations, he had gone from arguing with skeptical council members about the theoretical existence of humans to signing a military alliance with a species that commanded the most powerful fleet he had ever encountered. As the shuttle lifted off from Geneva, Cretan looked back at the planet below. Earth was beautiful, vibrant with life and potential. But it was also a fortress, armed and ready for war, its inhabitants seasoned by millennia of internal conflict, and now prepared to export that martial capability to the galaxy. "Doctor," he said to Zelmar as they broke through the atmosphere into space, "I believe we may have awakened something the precursors feared." The Mindel scientist was quiet for a long moment, watching through the viewport as they approached their ship. Finally, he spoke. "Perhaps, Admiral. But consider this. Maybe the precursors quarantined humanity not because they feared what humans were, but because they feared what humans could become. And maybe, just maybe, that potential is exactly what the galaxy needs right now." 6 weeks later, Varathian Supreme Commander Zethkra stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, reviewing the strategic map of his dominion. 12 new systems had been brought into the Harmony in the past cycle, and 3 more would fall within days. The assembly was collapsing, as he had predicted. Soon, the entire sector would be unified under Varathian control. "Supreme Commander," his intelligence officer reported, "we are detecting unusual communications traffic among assembly vessels. They appear to be coordinating fleet movements." Zethkra's species did not smile, but his posture indicated satisfaction. "Another desperate defensive maneuver. Redirect our forces to—" "Sir, we have incoming vessels, multiple contacts appearing at extreme range." "Assembly reinforcements?" Zethkra asked dismissively. "Their reserves are depleted. They cannot field more than—" "Sir, the numbers do not match any assembly force structure. I am reading thousands of contacts. Energy signatures are unlike anything in our database." Alarm penetrated Zethkra's confidence. He moved to the tactical display, studying the data himself. What he saw made his blood run cold. Ships were appearing from faster-than-light travel in formations that spoke of military discipline and tactical coordination. The energy signatures were powerful, and there were so many of them, thousands upon thousands. "Identification?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. Configuration does not match any known assembly vessel class. Attempting communication protocols." And a transmission came through, audio only, in flawless Varathian. The voice was calm, almost friendly, but somehow that made it more terrifying. "Varathian forces, this is General Alexandra Reed of the United Earth Fleet. You are hereby ordered to withdraw from all occupied systems and cease hostilities against the Galactic Assembly. Failure to comply will result in immediate military action. This is your only warning." "Earth?" Zethkra's confusion was absolute. "There is no such civilization in our intelligence reports. This must be a trick." "Sir, we are receiving similar transmissions across all occupied systems. These unknown vessels are appearing in every theater simultaneously. Tactical analysis suggests coordinated strikes against our supply lines and forward positions." On the tactical display, Zethkra watched as the Earth fleet began to move. They did not advance chaotically or with the hesitation of the assembly forces he had grown accustomed to fighting. They moved with purpose, splitting into precise formations, each one optimized for the strategic objective it was assigned. And then they opened fire. The weapons were different from assembly energy weapons. These were physical projectiles, moving at relativistic speeds, and explosive devices that detonated with such force that they overwhelmed shields through sheer kinetic impact. Varathian vessels that had withstood dozens of battles found their armor breached, their systems failing, their crews overwhelmed. "How is this possible?" Zethkra demanded as casualty reports flooded in. "Where did they come from?" His intelligence officer's voice was shaking. "Sir, I have accessed ancient precursor archives in our database. There are references to a quarantined species, isolated because they were deemed too dangerous to interact with galactic civilization. The designation was humanity. The quarantine was established in what would now be a region of space within the Orion Arm." "They were contained," Zethkra protested, even as his fleet began to crumble under the sustained assault. "The precursors would not have failed." "Sir, the precursors are extinct. Their quarantine is meaningless, and according to the archives, the reason for the containment was that humans possessed qualities that made them existential threats to galactic stability. The archives specifically note their refusal to surrender, their adaptability in warfare, and their tendency to become exponentially more dangerous when threatened. On the display, more Earth vessels were appearing, an endless tide of warships that seemed to have no limit. Zethkra realized with growing horror that his empire, which had conquered 12 systems and crushed dozens of fleets, was facing an enemy that had prepared for this moment far longer than he had existed. The transmission came again, that calm human voice cutting through the chaos of battle. "Varathian forces, you chose expansion through conquest. You chose to eliminate diversity in favor of uniformity. You chose to erase cultures and subjugate populations. These choices have consequences. Welcome to human warfare." As the inevitable conquest shuddered under impacts that overwhelmed its shields, as his fleet scattered and broke before an enemy that fought with precision and overwhelming force, Supreme Commander Zethkra understood a fundamental truth that would soon be learned by every Varathian in the Dominion. The galaxy had changed, the humans had arrived, and they had brought with them 10,000 dreadnoughts and a very simple message. Some species fought for territory. Some fought for resources. Humans fought for principles, and they fought to win. The age of Varathian expansion was over. The age of humanity in the galaxy had begun. And across assembly space, on worlds that had nearly given up hope, beings looked to the skies and saw those same dreadnoughts overhead, not as conquerors, but as defenders. The legends had been true. Humanity existed, and they had not forgotten how to fight.